Hey there everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a little under the weather, but I still wanted to get another video finished before the end of the week. Building up a roster of 28 good units for Arena Assault can be overwhelming and expensive, not to mention totally unnecessary. You do need to have your A team to set the standard, but after that you kind of just need a roster of specifically built counterpick units to throw at whatever you see. Fortunately, a lot of these filler units can be made on the cheap, and don't lose much effectiveness when compared to their expensive counterparts. For me, it all hinges on two things: the disproportionate power of gem weapons and breaker skills. Before we talk about gem weapons, let's talk about Triangle Adept and why I'm not using it for these builds. Triangle Adept, unsurprisingly, magnifies the effect of the weapon triangle, although in Fire Emblem Heroes it's more accurate to call it the color triangle. Triangle Adept can be inherited from Selena, Roy, Soniki, Cordelia, or Performing Arts Azura. Unfortunately, of these units, only Roy has the skill fully unlocked at 4-star, and sacrificing a Soniki or limited time unit just to pass along Triangle Adept is a bit pricey for what you get. So Triangle Adept is hard to come by, and even though it's incredibly powerful, it's just too rare for me to consider it a viable budget skill. Thankfully, the gem weapons do the same thing, and they're a lot more common. The gem weapons, Ruby, Emerald, or Sapphire, all share the Triangle Adept effect, but they provide it in the weapon slot instead of the A slot. It is important to note that the effect from a gem weapon does not stack with Triangle Adept, so you should never use them both together. Like I mentioned, gem weapons can be found on a lot of common units. Ruby's sword can be inherited from Hinata, Pala, Seth, or Stahl. Emerald Axe can be acquired from Arthur, Narshan, or Titania. And Sapphire Lance is available on Azura, Oscar, Tsubaki, and Sully. The Triangle Adept or gem weapon effect does one thing really well. It helps your units crush matchups that they have color advantage in. That may not seem useful at first. After all, you already have advantage, so why do you need more? But in practice, it's immensely valuable. Triangle Adept and gem weapons, in real terms, provide the most reliable and scalable buff in the entire game, increasing damage dealt and reducing damage taken by 20% at all times whenever they're effective. The reason this is great for Arena Assault is obvious. Because you can check the map before every battle after the first, you can send specific units to deal with the enemy team. Fighting off a +10 Aera will be really tough with most red or blue units, but someone like Tsubaki, even at +0, can take her down with no problem. Triangle Adept only helps your good matchups, and makes your bad matchups pretty much unwinnable. But what about your neutral matchup? That's where breakers come in. Breaker skills do one thing and one thing only: win you matchups against specific weapon types. Every breaker works the same way. As long as you're above a certain amount of HP, you negate any follow-up attack from your opponent and guarantee a follow-up attack, regardless of speed, for yourself. Basically, if you have the right breaker, they can never double you and you will always double them. All breakers are B-slot skills, and there are some limitations on which units can inherit which breakers. In general, you can't inherit a breaker skill for a weapon type that has advantage over you, so no inheriting Swordbreaker onto Axe units, for example. Swordbreaker is available on Abel, Sully, and Ike. Axebreaker is available on Laszlo and Eliwood. Lancebreaker can be found on Arthur, Narshan, or more recently, Oscar. Daggerbreaker and Bowbreaker can be found on Kagero and Setsuna, respectively. Unlike Triangle Adept, breakers don't gain too much from being max rank. A level 2 breaker skill will work just as well as a level 3 most of the time. When we combine these, we get what I like to call the build. A gem weapon plus a same color breaker. That's it. This build lets you hard counter an entire color and lets your budget units secure auto doubles against units of a specific weapon type. Some of the best candidates for this build are common units you don't see much of in Arena, units like Oscar, Arthur, or Seth. This is also a great build to throw on 4-star merged units because the scaling nature of the gem weapon effect leverages the boosted stats very well. Let's look at a few examples. Again, these are budget builds, so I'm using default skills whenever possible and trying to make these units work at a bare minimum. I put some recommended upgrades below each build, just in case you enjoy these units and decide you want to invest in them a little more. Up first we have Tsubaki. With a plus speed nature, he's fast enough to avoid doubles from a lot of red and blue units. Tsubaki does his job out of the box, which is all you can ask for out of a budget unit. He does need a special to secure kills reliably though, so I suggest that you inherit something like Bonfire to him right away. From there you can make some cheap investments in other skills by inheriting Fortress Defense for his A slot, and something like Threaten Attack or Threaten Defense for his C slot. Next we have Titania, one of my personal favorite units in the game. Titania is not great at tanking enemy melee hits. Her defense and HP are a bit on the low side. Luckily, her resistance and speed more than make up for that. Titania is one of the best budget mage tanks around, and she can brawl with dragons too. She comes with a gem weapon out of the box, so all she needs is green Tomebreaker and she's ready to go. If you really like Titania, like I do, you can then take the next step and upgrade her into a proper enemy phase monster by giving her distant counter, but that's a bit too expensive to cover in this video. Finally, we have a unit that most people see as fodder, but in reality he's one of the better budget red units in the game, Hinata. Hinata is slow, but he comes with Fury and a ruby sword out of the box, giving him phenomenal bulk against green units. Even with a neutral nature, he has well above average defenses, and once he has both Swordbreaker and a damaging special, he can deal with pretty much any red or green physical threat. He'll get eaten alive by Manicheets, but that's par for the course for sword units these days. These are just a few example builds, but you can apply this logic to almost any unit and turn them into something useful. I looked at units with gem weapons by default, but don't forget that you can pass them around too. Anyone can be turned into a dedicated hard counter, and if you do this, your roster will gain a lot of depth and arena assault will become much easier. If you don't have a couple of units like this to work with, I recommend that you give it a shot. I promise they'll be a lot better than they first appear. Hopefully I did a good job with this video, but that's not for me to decide. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. As always, I hope to see you next time.